Hey guys, it's Bill from Linden, Tennessee. So we got a little change of gears this weekend. My uncle-in-law has this bad boy bone collector off-road ATV thing. It's pretty much just a beefy golf cart with a lot of suspension and four-wheel drive. It's got one motor in the back and one motor in the front, and it had I should have probably done this video when it was daytime because I could have showed you the difference in batteries, but it had a whole bunch of Trojan T145 6-volt storage lead acid batteries, and each of those weighs 70 something pounds, and 8 of them. So we're like 600 pounds worth of batteries, and it didn't go very far. Those kind of batteries don't last very long, but I took all of them out. There was 2 of them up front here and 6 of them back here. I took all those out and replaced them with about 120 pounds worth of lithium iron phosphate 100 amp hour cells, and that works out to about 5.5 kilowatt hours, and this is good for about 20 miles, which best I can tell is further than the lead acid batteries would have ever gone even when they were new. Just because even if the amp hour capacity rating on a storage battery lead acid says that it's 200 amp hours or something, you can only use half of it because it badly damages lead acid batteries if you take them below below 50% state of charge. Anyway, lead acid batteries are awful. They're fine in a storage situation, I guess, but the price of lithium batteries has come down so much that, man, I really can't see any good reasons for using lead acid batteries for any reason other than starting your car. The only thing that's a downside of lithium batteries is once their core temperature, their internal temperature gets below freezing, you can't charge them. You can still use them, you can still discharge them, but you can't charge them. The interesting thing, cool thing is that once you've started driving or doing something with them, they start to warm themselves up internally, and it doesn't take too long before their internal temperature is above freezing. So, and at that point, then you can charge them. Anyway, so that's what I've done. I've taken all those batteries out, and I put in it's my favorite JLD 404 is what this meter is called. It's just a voltmeter, amp meter, but it also counts amp hours. It counts coulombs. So it tells you, so you reset this each time you use it. And I know that these cells are 100 amp hours. So as you're driving along, this thing will count 1, 2, 3. And then to be on the safe side, once it gets to 80, that's when you're done. So what you would do is if you were driving somewhere or driving all day or whatever, you would just watch this thing until it gets to 40. And then once it gets to 40, that's when your day is over. It's time to turn around and go back home. And by doing it that way, you do have a little bit of reserve. So, once you get to 80, you still got some, but not very much. So anyway, so I put that on there, and then now I'm just going through all these cells and bottom balancing them. I haven't decided if I'm going to put a battery management system on these yet. With Tesla cells and Nissan Leaf cells and any of the non-lithium iron phosphate lithium-based battery cells, you kind of do need a battery management system on there because their electrolyte is flammable at a lower temperature, and that equals big fire if you get something wrong. Whereas these are pretty indestructible. You can murder them. You can run their voltage down to 0, in which case they're unrecoverable and they are destroyed. But they generally just short out internally, and you can still run some current through them. They may get a little bit warm and they'll swell up, but generally speaking, they won't catch on fire. They're much, much safer. Lithium iron phosphate also has a whole lot more charge cycles than the other lithium chemistries do, so they last longer. You can, if you do have a battery management system on them, you can charge them up to 100% and discharge them down to 0% repeatedly, and it doesn't damage them, whereas the other lithium chemistries, they kind of say they do. This is all just sort of theoretical because the only vehicles on the road that have any actual real world experience are Teslas. They're the only ones that have been out 10 years, so we can actually get some data how their batteries are doing. And everything that I've read, which granted it could be biased because I read, I tend to read pro Tesla articles, say that the batteries are just lasting much longer than they ever expected, even with Nissan Leafs and other ones. And of course, if you don't, depending on where you get your news, you're going to hear that all these things are all dying, and the after service is terrible for Teslas, and when the battery goes, it's $30,000 to replace it, and that's more or less all true. But the vast majority of these things are not dying, and they're lasting a very, very long time. And anyway, so yeah, I got a little 12-volt battery right there. That's basically just for running the winch. This has a 4,500-pound winch on it, and it's also for the lights. And then the two contactors over there for the two motor controllers right there, those are 12-volt. Well, they're not 12-volt, but there's a relay that controls the 48 volts that goes to those contactors. I found that out because if you don't have a 12-volt battery in here, then this thing won't do anything. I've got a DC-DC converter on order, so it'll take the 48 volts from this battery here and step it down to 12 or 13 volts to keep that battery charged. Something else I'm going to do, I've got a different meter coming that's a little more pretty. I may or may not keep the JLD 404 on there once I hand it back over to my uncle-in-law. But there's a meter that has an icon, just not an icon, a GUI graphic user interface. Yeah, it's got a battery meter, so in a state of charge display. Up here in the front, where the other two lead acid batteries are, I think I'm going to see if I can't find an off-grid inverter charger. So maybe like a 2,000 watt or 3,000 watt. I don't have a whole lot of room up here, but what I was thinking and hoping that maybe I can do, and I'm going to kind of use this as a guinea pig for it, is if I can get an inverter charger. Those off-grid inverters, they typically have a transfer switch internally. So if the battery itself has gone below a certain voltage, then that internal transfer switch will switch over, and it'll take power from the grid, if you happen to be connected to one, or a generator, and it'll charge your pack up to either fully charged or wherever you tell it to. So what I might be able to do is have that inverter in here, and when the battery is full, or when it's not connected to 120 or 220 volt AC, then it would be an inverter. So you could run lights or a drill or grinders or welders or whatever, sewing machine, whatever you do with 110, refrigerator, cooler. But you could run it for quite a long time on 5 kilowatt hours worth of battery. And whenever the battery gets low, just from driving it, then you'd go home, you'd go in the garage, or you'd go out to the field where there's a generator, or whatever your plan is, and you could plug it into that, and it would charge the battery. But it would also, if I can find one, have one that has a way that you can connect solar panels to it. So if you're out in the field or you're out in your off-grid cabin, and this is sort of your power source and your mode of transportation, and you go to your cabin and you park it for a few days, and you got some solar panels at the cabin, you could plug the solar panels up to this inverter charger, and they would charge the battery. And and if you had enough of those panels, then they could charge the battery and put the lights on for you. But yeah, anyway, it's just thinking out loud at this point. I'm gonna see what I can find online and just go ahead and order one and plug it up here and see what happens. It's kind of convenient because these big heavy cables, they ran power from the 2 6-volts back to the rest of the pack, and so I can just put different ends on those and plug those straight up into the inverter. So that's kind of cool. And then I've got on my fuse block here, so I've got an easy source for my 12-volt, for my triggers or whatever I need it for. I don't know at this point. But that's sort of the plan for this thing. And if that inverter charger situation works, then I'm probably going to put a similar thing on the Cub. I'm not going to talk about this too much because that's not what this is about, but I've kind of ditched the idea of the Tesla batteries I was going to put up here. These cells right here are the same what I just showed you that's in the little ATV. So these are lithium iron phosphate. I'm thinking that I may use these for the tractor. Now, it's crazy, so these are two This is two Tesla modules out of a Model S or X, and each one of them is 24 volts. So you put them together and it's 48 volts. Now it's actually, you would charge these to 49.2. So that's kind of important, but combined, these are about 10 or 11 kilowatt hours, and they weigh 100 pounds. This here is also 48 volts now, but this one you charge to 56.4 volts, or probably 54 volts just to kind of keep it safe, but you could charge it up to about 56.4 volts. So the voltage is higher, but the kilowatt hours is still computed the same way by volts times amps. Volts times amp hours is how you get kilowatt hours. And being that these are 100 amp hour cells, that's 5.64 kilowatt hours. So, and this weighs about 120 pounds. So you see, the weight is roughly the same. The Tesla batteries are actually lighter, and they do take up less space in height. They're a little bit longer than this front to back, but they're twice as much energy. So the energy density of Tesla modules is just phenomenal. And if you compare this 120 pound or that Tesla 100 pound compared to those 700 pounds worth of 6-volt lead acid batteries, it's mind numbing how much more energy density there is in Tesla packs. So, or even lithium iron phosphate for that matter, than there is in lead acid, which comes all back full circle to why I can't imagine why anybody would ever want lead acid batteries unless you just happen to be in a situation where you don't need to pull large currents for an extended period of time, and it gets cold. It gets really, really cold, like a lot. So, all right, if that's you, then maybe lead acid is more your thing. But even then, I don't know. So anyway, yeah, so that's what I've been up to this weekend. And once I start getting all these parts in, then I can try and get this thing finished up and rolled on out of here so I can get back on the Cub. So until next time, thanks for watching.